I think it's important to sort of get your perspectives on this, Marisa, because you've got to prepare for a show coming up, the expansion draft show that's coming up, where everybody can tune in on CBS platforms. And there's a certain block of time that has to be filled. So looking into these rules, right, that were slated for X amount of teams, everybody knew that Kansas City wasn't going to be part of it, but there's still a lengthy amount of teams there. But now looking ahead into this particular draft event, that's not shaking out to be what the scenario is. As of right now, there are teams that have complete protection from both San Diego Wave FC and Angel City FC. There are teams that have full roster protection from either or, and there are a couple teams that have what's just partial protection. Right. So we're also starting to see like the evolution during this current trade window of like what roster protection looks like when it comes to being an actual tradable asset. So you were a part of last year's preparation and that draft coverage with Racing Louisville, where there was that sort of historic move that was made before it, where Chicago and Racing said, yes, this is a tradable asset. Here it is, full roster protection. And now we're seeing in 2021 a little bit of evolution in that.
Everyone's like, me too, here.
I want that. I want this. Well, I only want that. And so we're looking at some teams that are only getting like OL Reign traded for just protection for their forwards in this list. And then you have Washington Spirit, who are trading for only allocation protection. So when you're the reporter for this type of event, having to sort of keep the people engaged and keep them informed, what are your perspectives in terms of covering this draft as it's going to look right now versus what it was maybe supposed to look like going in?
I think you just need to remain flexible. Even as we're talking right now, what I'm preparing for is going to have to change probably 2 or 3 more times, just because we honestly don't know, because trades, of course, have happened that we don't know about yet that can have implications on who's exempt, who's protected, who's not. And I find that exciting. It's incredibly what's the word I'm looking for? Stress inducing, but I like to ride that kind of adrenaline wave a little bit. And right now there's, less than 10 picks in the expansion draft. If you think back to last year's college draft, the first round took 2 hours. I remember because I was there and it was extremely long. So, in my mind, it's like, if we need to fill a certain amount of time, we have things to talk about, because this was a year unlike any other for NWSL, good and bad. So there's tons of things we can always go back to and talk about the impact on why it's relevant now at an expansion draft date. And that's kind of where I love to be creative with who I get to talk to, what kind of questions I want to ask them, because there's so many people that can put this past season in a unique perspective. And I think that's what we're going to be leaning on, is telling the story of not just this year from what I learned as a reporter, but pulling it out of people and getting to know exactly what it was like for people involved, people who are now part of these new expansion clubs, who I think if I were ever gifted with the athletic ability to be a professional player, I would love to be part of an expansion club, because very rarely do you get to be part of something for the first time. And very rarely in American sports culture do you get to build a sports franchise from the ground up. And I find that so, so incredibly exciting. Maybe I'm a nerd. I probably am. But I find that just so unique. You don't get to do that all the time. So to talk to these players who are part of these new teams, hopefully, about how they want to lay this groundwork. You have such experienced players being part of these new teams, like Sarah Gordon. I'm sure she's got ideas. I'd love to hear them. That's kind of what gets me through the craziness that is leading into it, knowing that I get to share it with the fans who are so passionate, who actually care about all this stuff too. And we can kind of take this wild ride together, and just know full-heartedly, I'm trying my best. I'm keeping up with what I can keep up with. And we're gonna bring you, I think, a lot of great coverage that is both relevant to the picks that are being made, but also the picks that were already established.
And not just one team like last year, 2 teams, which almost doubles your prep work that you have. And Yes. Does it double it?
Yes.
Okay, of course it does, because that's always how it goes, and it's constantly changing, not for one team, but for two teams. Something that's really interesting that you did touch on, and I want to give our listeners a little bit of an inside look as to kind of what your prep looks like. I mean, I've talked about it from a broadcaster's perspective, being in the booth, that we do get to talk to coaches before matches, kind of pick their brains on starting lineups, who's switching, why they're switching, if they're changing formation based on their opponents and what they're bringing to the table. So for you, ahead of this draft, I mean, you talked with a lot of the coaches last year ahead of games, but there's a lot of new coaches in the league now. There's a lot of different people that you have now gotten to speak to ahead of some of the drafts, and new coaches that have come into the league. So do you get to speak with every single coach in the league ahead of these drafts, and how open are they with kind of sharing their secrets, especially because Wilkinson, Laura Harvey now gets to draft this team. There's so many new coaches that get to draft. So what have you found talking to these coaches?
I think it always differs coach to coach. Of course, everybody knows, like, hey, like, anything you tell us is really just to prepare for the broadcast. I'm not out here making money like bootlegging NWSL secrets. That's not that's not my
Which
MO.
I'm sure you could.
Yeah, like, I'm like, you remember Recess, that cartoon, like the
Yes.
hustler kid? Like, I got pamphlets in my trench coat of like just like
Yes.
NWSL secrets. It's not my thing. That's not my bag. But so it differs coach to coach of like what they're comfortable sharing. And of course, like, we're gonna keep digging. Like, listen, I need answers. Like, you need to meet me halfway with this thing. But yeah, we do get to talk to every single coach, or at least a representative from the teams, just to kind of get their perspective on the draft, because everyone really approaches it so differently. People like to see it, some people put it on a pedestal. Some people are like, listen, I'm just trying to get through. And it's like, either way, there's no wrong way to go about it. It's just coach's preference. And that's always what's really interesting to me, is to see which coaches kind of favor the draft more than others. And I know it's been interesting over the years, because, as I said, I've covered several drafts, college and expansion. And it's always interesting, especially for like the first year, like European coaches who this is their first year in like in a draft setting. It's so completely foreign to them. And us as American sports fans, like, the drafts are huge, huge parts of the season. And for a European coach to come in and be like, what is this? Why am I doing this? It's fun to kind of see the cultural difference too in the approach. But I think everybody sees at least a small amount of value in the draft. I mean, you have players like Bethany Balser, who were sleepers in college drafts. And of course, we know how amazing she's been in the league. So it's always interesting to see. But yeah, we're just trying to gather as much information as humanly possible without our heads combusting. So there's that fine line. I'm sure you guys always teeter on that too.
Absolutely. I mean, you're gonna keep digging for the info, and we're gonna keep doing that as well, and watching along. But there is info that's out there already. There were all these huge trades that happened. So I guess in within all your preparation, and obviously prepping for this event, you're going to have to rehash all that for a lot of people who are maybe tuning in for the first time, right? Who maybe don't watch Attacking Third, who maybe don't keep an ear or an eye constantly on the Twitter feeds when it comes to NWSL Twitter. And there were huge ones. There were the big trade between Angel City and Chicago. Sam Ewis going to Kansas City. Gotham really getting in the mix a number of times with trading away their goalkeepers, and then getting a goalkeeper of their own in Ashen Harris. When you're looking at these moves and you're making all of your preparations for this event, what is like the one move that maybe stood out the most or was the biggest to you?
Gosh, it's hard because I have to go with the Chicago trades, because Chicago is always a team that's based around tradition, and consistency. And they always had, you could almost predict their lineup, barring those injuries that they faced this year. But it was so consistent on who you can expect. And my gosh, Sarah Gordon was the only Iron Woman of the league. If they had a game, she was going to be in it. So it was just so kind of surprising to see these names that you so closely associate with Chicago being traded away. It kind of felt like the right time, perhaps, that, there's a fresh start. Rory Dames resigned. Everything's kind of getting reset over there a little bit. and, Julie Ertz and Sarah Gordon want a different opportunity, perhaps. So that to me really stood out, because I was like, wow, to get Chicago to kind of break that cycle of tradition was really big. And then they traded away 3 other players to San Diego too. So they're really starting from scratch. I'm going to be very interested to see what direction Chicago's goes in, what they start to really prioritize, but also the Ashlyn Harris and Ali Krieger move from Orlando to Gotham, Kaylin Sheridan leaving Gotham. That was a whole big thing too, that I was like, wait, hold on a sec. Like, I had to center my brain and be like, what is happening? And how do I feel about it? And I think I feel good about it, because I'm a fan of all 3. And I think they're all going to kind of flourish in their own ways in these new settings. But also we saw that upon their arrival, Ashlyn and Ali did the sideline fashion show. And isn't that what we all just really wanted? I think we can all go to bed knowing that happened.
I mean, Ashlyn Harris has been touted as like a fashionista of the league for years, and now that she gets to be on the runway cam with Gotham, like, I'm so here for it. That's true. That was a really big tribute.
It's not good for anyone's like wallet, because I saw Ashlyn and Ali at the championship because they did that pregame show, and they just looked so cool. And I was like, oh my God, my outfit is absolute garbage. And they're sitting here in like Louis Vuitton pants and combat boots. I'm like, I gotta go. I can't be here. I can't be next to them.
Well, Marisa, I always think you look great wandering the sidelines and at the drafts in the past, when you were actually in attendance, which you were supposed to be flying to LA. I mean, we were also speaking with Lori Lindsay, and she's like, yeah, I got a flight to LA and I'm doing this. Last minute, the draft changes for everyone involved. That includes the broadcasters and the reporters and the analysts that were supposed to be flying to LA, the teams that were supposed to be hosting. San Diego was supposed to be hosting a little launch party before the drafts happen. Now, none of that is happening, because word has changed that the expansion draft is now being held virtually, which you did a virtual draft before. So you've been down this path, but you were prepping to be at the Lowe's Hotel, to be in person interviewing these players, and now it's virtual. Does that change your prep or your mindset at all, or even your shoe choice heading into the studio?
Shoe choice, yes, because no one will see my feet now. But in terms of prep, I think the prep stays the same. I think the approach has to change, because when you're with someone, you really can pull from the energy you're getting from them, especially, they just got drafted. Or they're excited, or these expansion clubs, there's so much energy around them, and you can kind of pull from that in person. And I think, as you guys know, you do this show digitally, you have to work a little bit harder to get that emotion out of people, to really understand what they're feeling in that moment and what you're trying to pick up on. So that's kind of where my mind went, is how can I make this person, whoever it is that I'm talking to on the other side of the screen, feel as comfortable as if we were sitting right next to each other or standing right next to each other. So that's just kind of, it's all about being a good listener. It's all about kind of almost being empathetic and getting into their mindset a little bit of how would I be feeling in this situation and what would I want to be asked, and just humanizing everything. And I think that's important, especially when it's something as exciting as a draft. Usually the energy is always really high anyway and super positive. So being able to kind of ride that through the screen is a little different. But listen, I've never been to California, and I was really excited to go. No knock on Florida. I'm happy to be there, but I've been there before, and I wanted to go to LA. I'm going to be honest. I just really wanted to go to LA.
We'll get you
wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Put it out there. You know what? We're going to manifest it, Marisa. We're going to manifest it. We're going to say, fingers crossed, we're going to get Marisa Pilla to LA eventually.
Put on the vision board.
It's not going to be this time, but we're going to get there. We're going to see Marisa Pilla in LA doing NWSL coverage. I love it. This was awesome. We're so excited to watch you in action during this expansion draft and all the teams who are going to be participating.